Welcome into a special edition of Inside Carolina. It's not a noon dish, it's a commit dish. Don Callahan bringing some breaking news of a 2026 defensive lineman that'll be committing to the North Carolina Tar Heels, or has committed to the North Carolina Tar Heels, and Coach Bill Belichick. But first, one thing he's going to do that you can also do, he's going to play with a cool brand new football when he gets to North Carolina in 2026. Check out Big Game USA.
You think you know North Carolina? It's not just the Smoky Mountains and the Old Well. This is Kenan Stadium, where the Jordan Fly Elite game ball makes its debut and its homecoming. Born to fly, built for Carolina. Snag your Carolina blue today.
Don Callahan, the new footballs, Big Game USA, proud sponsors of this podcast, along with Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Don Callahan, 2026 defensive lineman, Trashawn Ruffin. A lot of people have talked about in-state kids. This is a big in-state kid from North Carolina.
Yeah, four-star guy who was committed to Texas A&M for, I guess, since the football season. And the prior staff had offered and were pursuing him a little bit. He had some academics he needed to work out, and he was making some progress, which is why the prior staff had offered. But things didn't really kind of pick up with him until the new staff, the Bill Belichick staff, came into office and really starting to establish a really strong relation with him, specifically with Michael Lombardi was talking to him every day. And it really has been on this path to this commitment switch for, I don't know, I guess a couple months now. And he visited Chapel Hill for the big junior day, that included the UNC Duke basketball game a couple weekends back. And that really was probably the final straw that kind of pushed it into this direction. And after kind of mulling the decision for a week, thinking about it, praying about it, talking to family members about it, he ended up flipping his commitment to North Carolina, and then actually returned to Chapel Hill on Monday to make the commitment flip in person with the Tar Heel staff.
Yeah, Ruffin, we mentioned him on the noon dish last week. Big guy. 6'3", 307, just a large human being. I'm going to throw up a couple pictures of him that Don took.
He's close to 330 now.
330.
You're probably looking at the his 24/7 profile is not updated. So yeah, this is a big kid, and he moves really well.
Yes, you can see Don visited North Duplin High. Don, this is a small school. This is a tiny, high school, 1A high school next to, I guess, in Mount Olive. Just, what did the staff see in him, and what did Texas A&M, I guess, to start with, see in him that could provide him an opportunity to play in major college football out of such a small high school?
Well, this is a kid who has NFL tools, which is why a lot of the SEC schools were recruiting him very heavily. Schools like A&M and Georgia and those sort of programs that just love those big bodies that move really well. And they don't care how good of a high school player they are at the moment. And I'm not saying that Ruffin isn't a very good high school player, because he is, but they're more focused on the fact that having the moldable tools, the size, the mobility, and that's exactly what he has. You bring in Bill Belichick, who, as he's preached over and over again, and Lombardi has done the same thing on different podcasts and interviews, talking about the 33rd NFL team. So this is a kid who fits exactly into that, where you're bringing in a kid who, for developmental purposes, basically. And, as you mentioned, small school. And typically what happens when you go to a small school, you can't just focus in on one position and kind of work that position out. You have to play a lot of different roles, especially if you're a massive kid. You're doing a lot of different things, have a lot of different focuses. And that kind of, kind of slows you down as far as a production standpoint and being this great high school player. But that doesn't matter to the staff. They just love the fact that he has all the measurables that you ask for in a big old defensive tackle.
That's Don Callahan talking about Trashawn Ruffin, flipped to North Carolina from Texas A&M. Don, when I'm looking at you mentioned why the SEC schools liked him. Where are all the local schools in him? Was he just seeking higher ground with SEC schools. I look on his school list and all, but North Carolina obviously tried to get in last with the old staff. You mentioned academics and all that, and then Belichick comes around and makes the flip. His path on his recruiting venture, I guess, just sort of line it up for us. I mean, he's always been big, I would assume, all through his high school career. Here we are talking about a young man out of North Duplin and all the major SEC schools now at North Carolina.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give you a quote that he gave me when I went on location and visited him and his coaches at his high school. I guess it was a couple months ago. And so this is a quote from Ruffin. He's talking about North Carolina's camp. At the camp, they really did love me, but my grades weren't up to par. So they had to clear me in order to offer me. And one day they called me up and they were just like, man, we're going to offer you. They've been waiting for a long time for that. So he had some academic stuff that he had to work out, and he was on track to working those things out. And, some schools, I don't want to say they don't care about that stuff, but they will recruit you. And if you don't qualify, they'll place you at, a JUCO school, maybe a post-grad, which is not as common anymore. North Carolina, at least at that point, academics are a little bit harder than some of the other academic requirements for admission are a little bit harder. So they had to be a little bit more careful and didn't want to, pursue a kid that they didn't think was going to be able to make it into Chapel Hill. That was back in September, October. An entire semester has finished. I don't know specifics with his academics, but if he had a really good fall semester and his progress reports for the spring semester look really good, that makes a whole different academic situation for this kid. And then I'm sure some people kind of stepped in and kind of provided some guidance as far as tutors and maybe retaking this class. I don't know specifics, but that's a lot of time to pass to get some things in order in the classroom.
So Ruffin becomes part of the 2026 defensive line class. We've heard over and over about building inside out. They continue to work on that, even beyond 25 into 26, and I guess looking ahead to 27. But Don, as far as 2026, we talked about on Noon Dish about getting this class completed. You said by June. Well, here we are, and still in March. Where are they on the defensive line side of that as well? I know David Jackson and now Trashawn Ruffin. Just where do you see North Carolina standing here after this commitment with Ruffin?
Well, it's always so difficult because the fact that they are definitely pushing for the 105. So numbers change dramatically, and it gives you a lot more freedom, and you're not sticking so much to, position objectives numbers wise to kind of hit, and you're more kind of focused on just getting guys and kind of seeing where they kind of fall, position wise. So they're going to continue to recruit defensive linemen. Both of the guys that you mentioned with Jackson and with Ruffin are interior guys. So obviously some edge rushers are going to be needed. Some other, maybe strong side defensive end types are going to be needed for sure also. But this obviously, D tackles, big bodies that move really well, don't grow on trees. And so to get a couple of them early on is a really good sign.
When we look at it, a lot of people say, North Carolina needs to focus on in-state. Obviously, North Duplin is in-state. Where does that stand with North Carolina? I'll put you on the spot a little bit. I know they want to recruit nationally, and I know they want to, I think Lombardi told us back in January, North Carolina's footprint's basically everywhere, given the national brand. But in the state of North Carolina, what is the status of North Carolina football recruiting within the walls or within the confines of the state?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that everyone's going to point to this and be like, "Oh, look, they're prioritizing the state." And I don't think this is necessarily a sign of that. I think they were always going to get, even if you don't make North Carolina the priority, the in-state guys the priority, you're still going to land guys in state just because of just the nature of it with guys being closer, that sort of thing. But I think it's a good sign. It helps. But I think there's still this approach of treating every state the same. Maybe the states that are within your whatever 5-6 hour driving radius, maybe they're getting a little bit more of the priority, but I still don't see the in-state guys being the priority at the moment, despite this commitment. And what you could also see is just a natural sort of, the nature of recruiting kind of almost forcing the staff to kind of focus in-state or focus closer to campus, because they start to realize that, it's a lot harder to get that kid from California to visit. I mean, UNC still has 3 commits from California who have yet to visit campus, and they committed back in January, and we're in mid-March. Now they're supposed to visit by the end of this. All 3 of them are supposed to visit by the end of this month. But I'm sure just kind of realizing, hey, we are a national brand, but it is a whole lot easier to recruit closer kids because we can more easier get those guys on campus. And so you might see a little bit of that, but I think we're a ways away from saying the staff is making the in-state guys a priority.
We're talking with Don Callahan. Trashawn Ruffin of North Duplin High commits or flips from Texas A&M, commits to North Carolina to become part of Bill Belichick's 2026 recruiting class, the second defensive lineman in the class. Don, I'm looking at your defensive line recruiting board, and if folks are watching this and are not a member of Tar Pit Premium Message Boards or Inside Carolina Premium, you need to do it because Don's comprehensive recruiting board. And Don, I must say, there are a lot more names on this recruiting board than there have been in years past. It seems like there are a plethora of new names, and they pop up consistently. So folks need to make sure they bookmark this on the premium side. But Don, when you look at this commitment, the next couple months coming up, you mentioned the June thing. How busy are official visits going to be between now and that June timeframe? I mean, it just seems like it's a lot going on for high school kids. You've got end of junior year for these 2026 guys. You've got whatever else going on. They play other sports. How busy will the official visit busyness be in Chapel Hill over the next 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks?
Yeah, it's going to be really busy. I think, though, what the staff did was they definitely casted a wide net, as we were talking about, throwing out offers throughout the nation, California, Texas, Florida, all the way up in the Northeast, in that New England area, even guys in the Midwest. There were offers being sent out to places that North Carolina had never really recruited at all. And I think ultimately it won't be all of these guys aren't going to officially visit North Carolina. It's going to be a much smaller subset of the offers that you see on Inside Carolina's recruiting board, just because, you throw in an offer, a kid says great things about North Carolina, and then there are a lot of situations where they're just not going to end up taking an official visit. Even though high school kids receive unlimited official visits, there aren't unlimited weekends. And we are seeing some kids really kind of take it to the extreme with, 7, 8 official visits, but most are still staying within that 4 or 5 official visit schedule. And, and if history repeats itself this cycle compared to the last couple of cycles, we had kids who had 4 or 5 official visits scheduled, but ended up committing to a school before that schedule was completed, and ended up shutting it down, after the first or second official visit, saying, I found my school, and cancel the rest of the official visits. So there's also that kind of in play there too. But, this staff has shown just a propensity to continually recruit. And so you could see situations where we have a bunch of official visits scheduled, some get canceled, and then boom, this kid pops out of nowhere, is now a target, and now he's officially visiting this weekend. I think we're definitely going to see some of that in the summer months.
And just so folks understand, to make it clear, and Don talks about this every time he posts a scoop, kids can visit as many times as they want now. It used to be 5. Now they have unlimited official visits. Of course, time is not infinite, so that matters. But schools, Don, can still only host. Is it?
Yeah. So schools So they upped the amount of official visits schools can host. And then last year they actually removed that cap, and that actually, I have to check on this, but that might be still in place for this cycle. But
It
even
was
with
like
that,
56, wasn't it?
it was
55,
56, and
56.
then it got raised higher than that, because what was happening is not just the number is not just for high school recruits, it's for all official visitors. So that includes transfer portal kids. So now if you look at, I mean, I couldn't even off the top of my head guess how many official visitors North Carolina hosted for transfer portal kids in January and December. So so that obviously that number needed to be raised, and it was, and then they kind of removed the cap. And like everything else with the NCAA, everything's kind of up in the air, and what's the rule today might not be the rule in a month, or it might be changed. So yeah. But official visits do begin April 1st, and the majority of them take place in June. But we're definitely seeing a lot more kids taking official visits in April and in May this cycle compared to prior cycles. And as I said, whereas the last few cycles, we saw most kids schedule just 4 because there's only really 4 weekends in June. You saw a couple rare kids try to sneak in that midweek official visit so they could take 5. And even that was last year. With last year, there was the unlimited official visits for the high school kids. But this year, there are definitely some kids who are scheduling like 7, 8 official visits. And I'm really curious to see how many of those official visits take place and what happens when you have an official visit take place in April and then don't take the rest of your official visits in June. You have 4 official visits in June. That school that hosted you in April, what do their chances kind of stack up? Because memories are short, especially for a high school kid.
Yeah, it could be out of sight, out of mind. We'll see how it
Mm-hmm.
works out. But North Carolina adds to their 2026 recruiting class with Trashawn Ruffin, defensive lineman, 6'3", now 330-ish. We'll say ish, out of North Duplin High School in Mount Olive, North Carolina. Don Callahan, anything left? I'm sure we'll be doing plenty of these over the next several weeks and months as Bill Belichick continues to build that 26 class out. But anything left on this one?
I think we covered everything.
We've covered everything. That is it for Inside Carolina's Noon Dish, a commit dish. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com, and Congruity. And also, get you a new football. That Big Game USA. The link will be in the description. The
Or
link will
buy
be
me
in,
one.
Or buy Don one. Get him something different from what he has behind him. I could see Don with a hockey stick. That would be an interesting thing. Let's get Don a football. Let's get back to Inside Carolina's regular coverage of football recruiting with Don on the Tar Pit Premium message boards. Everybody join up. We'll see you next time.